Ladies and gentlemen, there is a life beyond what the senses perceive, beyond the mind's constant activity, and beyond the world of form. This life, unseen yet profoundly real, is the supernatural life, a life in which the Holy Spirit is not merely an abstract concept, but a living presence that moves through us, guiding, healing, and transforming. The invitation is this: step beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond the small self, and rest in the awareness of the Holy Spirit. In this place, the supernatural is not something to be sought. It is simply the way life is meant to be lived. The Holy Spirit is not an abstract concept or a distant force confined to religious texts and traditions. It is the living, breathing presence of the divine accessible in this very moment. Many people seek the supernatural in dramatic experiences, expecting signs and wonders that defy the ordinary. But in doing so, they often overlook the most profound truth. The supernatural is not something separate from us. It is here now, waiting to be recognized. In our daily lives, the mind is constantly engaged with thoughts, memories of the past, concerns about the future, endless mental commentary about what is happening. This habitual movement of thought creates a veil, a sense of separation from the divine. We believe that God is somewhere else, that the Holy Spirit is something we must reach for, something that requires effort to attain. But the truth is the opposite. The Holy Spirit is always present. It is we who are absent. It is we who are absent. It is not through struggle that we find God, but through stillness, through deep presence in the now. To access the supernatural life, one must first become aware of this moment, fully and without distraction. This does not mean simply acknowledging that now exists. It means deeply inhabiting the present moment with the entirety of one's being. When we do this, something extraordinary happens. The restless mind begins to quiet, and in that silence we start to perceive something beyond thought. This is the space where the Holy Spirit moves, not in the noise of constant thinking, but in the depth of stillness. When the mind is quiet, awareness expands. We begin to feel a sense of connection, an unshakable peace that does not depend on circumstances. This peace is not something we create. It is already present. It is simply revealed when the distractions of the mind fade away. The Holy Spirit is not separate from this awareness. It is this awareness, the pure consciousness, that underlies all things. In this state of presence, the supernatural life begins to unfold naturally. We no longer see the world as merely material and external. We recognize that everything carries a divine essence. Encounters with others are no longer just social interactions, they become moments of deep connection. Challenges are no longer just obstacles, they become opportunities for divine guidance to manifest. Even the simplest acts, like breathing or listening to the wind, take on a sacred quality. The idea that the Holy Spirit is only active in religious settings or during specific spiritual experiences is an illusion. It is present in all things, in every breath, in every moment of awareness. But we cannot experience this truth if our minds are constantly occupied with thoughts, judgments, and worries. The doorway to the supernatural life is the present moment, and the key is stillness. This does not mean we must withdraw from the world or sit in meditation all day. It simply means that we must cultivate a state of presence, a deep attentiveness to life as it is unfolding. When we do this, we begin to notice the guidance of the Holy Spirit in ways we never expected. Intuition becomes clearer, wisdom arises spontaneously, and synchronicities become frequent. We see that life itself is infused with divine intelligence. The supernatural is not an external event, but an internal shift. When we awaken to the now, we awaken to the Holy Spirit. In this state, faith is no longer a belief. It becomes a direct experience. We do not have to seek the divine. We only need to be still enough to perceive what has always been there. The Holy Spirit moves in the now. The question is, are we present enough to receive it? So quote, the supernatural life is not something we attain by seeking power or external validation. It is not about acquiring mystical experiences or extraordinary gifts. Instead, it is a state of being that arises when we transcend the ego and awaken to the deeper reality of divine presence. The Holy Spirit does not dwell in the illusions created by the mind, but moves freely in the space beyond thought, beyond personal identity, and beyond the conditioned sense of self. The ego is the voice in our minds that constantly seeks separation. It thrives on comparison, judgment, and attachment to form. It tells us that we are incomplete, that we must achieve, possess, or control something in order to be whole. This belief in incompleteness keeps us trapped in a cycle of seeking, always looking outside ourselves for meaning, always trying to secure a future that will finally bring us fulfillment. But true fulfillment is not found in the future. It is only ever available now. And it is only when we step beyond the limitations of the ego that we can experience the Holy Spirit as a living, guiding presence. To transcend the ego does not mean to reject it or fight against it. The ego is simply a collection of thoughts, identities, and patterns that we have come to believe define us. It is neither good nor bad. It is simply a structure. But if we identify completely with this structure, we remain cut off from the deeper reality of who we truly are. The Holy Spirit calls us to move beyond these surface identities and into the vastness of divine awareness, where we no longer see ourselves as separate from God, but as vessels through which the divine expresses itself. This shift in awareness is not an intellectual process. It is an experience. So it happens when we let go of the need to control, when we surrender the constant inner resistance that says, "This moment is not enough." The ego always wants more. It wants certainty, recognition, validation. But when we release this craving, something remarkable happens. We enter into a state of deep peace, and in this peace, we become receptive to the movement of the Holy Spirit. The supernatural life is not about doing extraordinary things. It is about living in alignment with divine intelligence. When we awaken from the illusion of ego, we no longer see life as something to manipulate or control. Instead, we begin to trust. We allow life to unfold as it is without resistance, and in doing so, we open ourselves to divine wisdom. This does not mean that we become passive. Phew. On the contrary, it means that our actions arise from a place of deep clarity, rather than fear or ambition. Many people believe that surrendering the ego means losing something, that if they let go of their personal identity, they will become nothing. But the truth is, what we let go of is only the illusion of separation. What remains is something infinitely greater, the awareness that we are not isolated beings struggling to survive, but part of the eternal presence of God. When this realization dawns, life takes on a new dimension. Prophetic. We begin to see the world with fresh eyes, no longer bound by past conditioning. Everything becomes alive with divine energy. When we move beyond the ego, love flows effortlessly. Love is the natural state of being when we are not caught in the fear-based narratives of the mind. While it is not something we need to force, it is simply there when we stop blocking it. This love is not possessive or conditional. It is not something that can be lost or gained. It is the very fabric of the supernatural life, the essence of the Holy Spirit working through us. To live this way requires awareness. It is a moment-to-moment practice of noticing when the ego tries to reassert itself, when it pulls us into thoughts of lack, fear, or resentment. Each time we become aware of this movement, we have a choice: to believe the voice of separation or to return to presence. This is the true spiritual journey, not a path of achieving something external, but of remembering what has always been within us. The Holy Spirit does not operate through the ego. It does not speak in the language of fear, doubt, or control. It speaks in stillness, in peace, in deep knowing, and the supernatural life is simply life lived from this place of deep alignment, where the self dissolves into something greater, and the presence of God becomes the guiding force behind every action, every thought, and every breath. The supernatural life is often misunderstood as something extraordinary, something beyond the reach of everyday experience. Many believe that supernatural encounters must involve visible miracles, divine interventions, or dramatic revelations. But the truth is far simpler and more profound. The gateway to the supernatural is inner stillness. It is in the quiet spaces of our being that the Holy Spirit moves most powerfully. It is in the absence of mental noise that divine wisdom, guidance, and miracles arise naturally. Most of human life is spent in a state of distraction. The mind is continuously occupied with thoughts, analyzing the past, planning for the future, reacting to external circumstances. This constant stream of thinking creates an inner restlessness that makes it difficult to perceive the presence of the Holy Spirit. You become so identified with our thoughts that we forget there is a deeper reality beyond them. But the moment we step into stillness, we begin to sense this reality. Quote, "Stillness is not merely the absence of noise or movement. It is a deep, living presence that underlies all things. It is the space in which true wisdom arises, not the knowledge accumulated by the mind, but the direct knowing that comes from the Spirit." In this stillness, we move beyond intellectual understanding and into direct experience. The supernatural is not something we must strive for. It is something we must become receptive to. The Holy Spirit does not need us to struggle or force anything into being. It does not require elaborate rituals or complex belief systems. It simply asks us to be present. When we quiet the mind, we make space for divine guidance to flow effortlessly. It is in these moments of deep awareness that we begin to notice the subtle workings of the supernatural in our lives. Insights come without effort, healing occurs in ways we cannot explain, and circumstances align in ways that seem beyond coincidence. Miracles are not external events imposed upon the world. They are the natural expression of a life lived in alignment with divine presence. They happen when we stop resisting the flow of life and allow the Holy Spirit to move freely through us. When we are still, we become aware of the sacred dimension of all things. A simple conversation, a moment of silence, or even the act of breathing can become a profound experience of divine presence. The greatest barrier to experiencing the supernatural life is the compulsion to always be doing, achieving, or controlling. The mind believes that action and effort are required to bring about transformation. But in reality, transformation happens in the space between thoughts, in the moments where we are simply being. The more we try to control life, the more we block the natural flow of grace. The more we let go and enter stillness, the more we see that everything we seek has already been given. Stillness is also the gateway to true faith. Faith is not blind belief. It is a deep trust in the unseen reality of God's presence. In the silence, we come to realize that the presence of the Holy Spirit is not something we must find. It is something that has always been here. We simply need to remove the mental clutter that obscures it. As we cultivate inner stillness, our perception of life changes. One of the most powerful aspects of the supernatural life is that it transforms even the simplest actions into acts of divine expression. A conversation with a friend becomes an opportunity to share love. A moment of silence becomes a doorway to deep communion with God.